nigga like me, man, I love the game. I love the hustle, man. I be feeling like one of them ball-playing niggas, you know? Like Bird, Magic, or something. Yeah, you know, a nigga got dough. A nigga could leave the league. But if I leave, the fans still gonna love me, man? I get love out here in Harlem, man. I done sold coke on these streets, man. Hash, weed, heroin. As long as niggas is feeling it, a nigga like me can hustle it. That's my gift in life, eh? You know? What? The fuck you laughing at, B?
You, man. Funny, man. You a hustling motherfucker, man. For real, baby. You fucking killing me, man.
Well, you know me, baby.
Hey guys, what's going on? Sub-Zero 3639. Wanted to come on here and give a brief intro to this video. Basically, in this video, I'm gonna go through, I guess, the mind of how you need to think and function in America. Do I think you need to step on people's backs and dog people to get to the top? I'm not one of the people that believe that. Because if you believe that, then you one step away from being a Marxist. Because in my mind, and I know that's kind of like, why ain't gonna say that? Because I guess, let me kind of fix that. What I meant by that is people that demonize those who are producers are the people that really, I don't want to have anything to do with it. Because I don't want to have anything to do with people like that, because I think that you can be a producer and have a heart, but also be very ambitious. You get what I'm saying? I'm ambitious. I want it all. I want what's coming to me. I also believe I can provide a service to a lot of people, as many people as I can, help people, enrich people's lives, and still be going for what's mine and what I want out of life. I don't think those need to be mutually, I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive. You know what I'm saying? I think we can have both of them. It's almost, as I'm listening to YouTube, man, we could get caught up in the rigmarole of trying to understand what it is people want out of life and what people are doing, and kind of getting it too misconstrued and thinking, you know what, Jay-Z is selfish, Jay-Z's wrong, he's evil, he's this, he's that. Yeah, what he did was twisted. I'm gonna be honest with you. He was twisted in how he did it, because he did go back on his own word and use the appeal to the emotions of black people to get cachet with black people, to be viewed as a leader. He did a lot of documentaries and did a few things and got people to be emotional and support him. And then once he did that, he was able to kind of parlay that into negotiating some sort of influence with the NFL. You know what I'm saying? So I can't fault the guy for that. You know what I'm saying? I fault the people that follow these celebrities, that believe that these celebrities are out here with their best interest in mind. That's rare, man. Most times these celebrities don't give a damn about us. That's the way I feel about it. You know what I'm saying? And I think that we need to kind of understand that in business, man, there are rules to business that we need to adhere to. And if you kind of, you know what I'm saying? It's kind of like rules. It's like when you heard me yesterday in my video, in my live, when I said, look, man, I'll do business with anybody. That is the Ayn Rand part of me talking, if you will. And for those of you who don't know who Ayn Rand is the author of the book. She came in from, I think, the Soviet Union. I think she is. If not, she's from somewhere over there. That I think at the time was part of the Soviet Union. But anyway, she came in, and I may be wrong about where she's from, but the point was she came from a communist country. She came to America. She enjoyed the freedoms of America, and she wrote a novel. She wrote two of them. But the main one that really got a lot of attention was the one called Atlas Shrugged. And for those of you that are familiar with Greek mythology, Atlas is a titan. Hence, this is where we get the mythology, a titan of industry. Atlas is a titan, right? And what he did is he was supposedly the one that held up the world, right? And what happened, I think he's supposed to be standing on the elephant. I mean, on a, not an elephant, whatever. But anyway, however it goes, he's holding up the world. And so she said, what if Atlas shrugged, in the sense that these people are titans of industry holding up major pillars of our community, in our society, in steel and you know, railroads and whatever the tycoon is, right? And we demonize these people. We tax them, we drag them. And so what she said was, what if they stopped giving a damn and said, fuck it, I give up. Y'all do what you want to do. How would that look for us as the people who you need these people to support us, in a sense? Now, I don't look at Jay-Z as a titan of industry. I don't think Jay-Z is a titan. Like, if he's a billionaire, which I doubt, if he's a billionaire, I think that he's not your regular, you know, Steve Jobs, if you will. He's not a Steve Jobs billionaire or a Bill Gates billionaire. Bill Gates has enriched the lives of just about everybody. Everybody within the sound of my voice is probably sitting in their house with some products that he was able to produce. If you got a laptop, Windows. If you got an iPhone, the iPhone actually runs on an Android. But anyway, I ain't gonna go there. Yeah, but if you got an iPhone, iPad, whatever, MacBook, that's Steve Jobs. If you got, you know what I'm saying? So these guys are actual. You could go in a house, in just about most houses in America, and see a product that someone produced. That's somebody that's probably a titan. If you could go in a situation where you're looking at people, like if you look at Andrew Carnegie, everybody deals with the metal he used, you know what I'm saying, when he was building the railroad. So his metal took off. If you look at John Rockefeller, Standard Oil, right? He gave you oil and he was a titan. He lit all the houses, and then he figured out about gasoline, and the rest is history. Right? And that oil, he did, of course, he was using oil. He did oil. He had Standard Oil. Henry Ford, same situation. You know what I'm saying? He didn't invent, technically, he got it from George Washington Carver. That's why they call it plant, because he got it from a plant, flowers, right? So he talked to George. He came to Tuskegee, learned that from George Washington Carver, and he implemented what's called a plant. I mean, a factory and assembly line, and that's how he was able to become a titan of industry, right? And so the point I'm trying to make is, if these guys had shrugged, in the sense, it would have affected the economy majorly. And so I myself don't have a problem. I'm not one of those guys. There was this dog track. This guy's dead now, Milton McGregor. Milton McGregor had a dog track, got one in Birmingham. He had one in Montgomery. There was a time when he was being messed with by the state. Really, the Indians were paying had lobbyists putting pressure on the politicians to go after the dog track, because the dog track was their competition. And so the Indians, the Creek Indians, what they did was they hired a guy, and it was found out this guy was the attorney general of the state or something like that. And they hired this guy because Milt McGregor hired a private detective to follow the guy down to Biloxi. And that's how the Creek Indians came into Montgomery when they did Wind Creek. They came and went after Milton McGregor. But the point I'm trying to make is, Milton McGregor, I was at the barbershop back when they shut him down. The sheriffs came and they shut him down, right? And when they shut him down, I heard a guy make a point. He said, man, Milton McGregor wrong. I said, why? He said, man, he shut that place down and the people can't pay their bills. He should be paying his employees' bills. I said, why does he owe his employees any damn thing? If they're not working, he'll owe them a damn thing. See, black people have to understand that when you do business with someone, once they give you what it is that you negotiated for, like if you're an employee, right, and you work 40 hours, right, and I pay you for those 40 hours, I don't owe you shit else, people. No one owes you anything. See, black people have this "you owe me" mindset. That's us overly being moral in business. So you do need to have some Ayn Rand, not all. I'm not 100%. Now she damn near like heartless with that shit. Like she really is. But I'm not like that. She calls it altruism, right? When you do good and stuff like that. But what she was saying was she believes that when you put altruism in, people shouldn't be forced or shamed into doing it. If they want to do it, they do it from their own heart, which I agree with that. But at the same time, she shames people for doing good deeds almost. I think she was way out there with it. I don't believe that. She believes in that the economy will correct this. I'm gonna put a speech in here with Henry Reardon from the movie. There's 3 movies, Atlas Shrugged 1, 2, and 3. You can check them out, real good movies. And then go and listen to the speeches of Ayn Rand. She was on Donahue when they used to really have thought-provoking talk shows and stuff. They don't do that no more. Like now you got ratchet reality shit. But go and check these 2 pieces out, and I'm out, man. Y'all be good.
Henry Reardon, you are charged along with Kenneth Daniger in absentia with 1 count of violation of Article 64 of the Fair Share Law. How do you plead, sir?
I do not recognize this court's right to try me, nor do I recognize any of my actions as a crime.
Simply refusing to obey the law is not a defense.
If you believe you may seize my property simply because you need it, well, then so does any burglar. The only difference is a burglar doesn't ask my permission. If you feel you have the right to use force against me, then show it for what it is. Bring guns.
Sir, we have no intention of pointing guns and seizing your property.
Then why are we here?
Mr. Reardon, you are misrepresenting the letter and the intent of the Fair Share Law. It is based on the highest principle, the principle of the public good. You wouldn't want it misunderstood that you work for nothing but your own profit.
Indeed, I want it understood clearly. I do not recognize the good of others as a justification for my existence. If their fair share demands that I get nothing for my labors, that it requires me to be a victim, then I say, public good be damned, I'll have no part of it.
And how does that benefit your fellow man?
I do not owe you an answer, but I could tell you in 100 ways. Thousands of jobs, billions in revenue, fueling our economy despite your efforts to destroy the very foundation of our existence. And I believe most of my fellow men would say the same, if they had a voice.
We need an example, not a martyr.
Can't set a precedent here, not with this man. Mr. Reardon, on your behalf, the court has entered a plea of no contest, and this panel has found you guilty. You are hereby sentenced to 10 years in prison and a fine of $50 million. Sentencing of Kenneth Daniger will be withheld pending his appearance before this body. Now, Mr. Reardon, taking into consideration your distinguished achievements, your contributions to society, and your full cooperation in this matter, your sentence is suspended. This court is now adjourned.
Every other week at this time, WKCR presents Ayn Rand on Campus. Miss Rand, founder of Objectivism, author of Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead, will answer questions by students of Columbia University and elsewhere about her philosophy. We're pleased once again to have Miss Rand with us. Also our guest panelists for the evening, Arthur Gandolfi of Columbia College, Jack Unger and Howard Hood of the Columbia University School of Law. I'm your host, Jack Kress. For our first question, Mr. Gandolfi.
Ms. Rand, it often happens that people, when they hear the word capitalism, react in a very hostile way, but they're their reasons for disliking capitalism are not always their true ones. By the tone of their remarks, it is evident that they have a much deeper antagonism towards capitalism. Could you give your opinion about this phenomena?
Yes, it is a very significant phenomenon. Whenever any issue is misrepresented for a long, long time, whenever you see people distorting facts, refusing to abide by facts, and not making any sense in their accusations, you may be sure that the reasons they state are not their true reasons and that there is something deeper behind it which they do not care to admit. This is particularly true in the case of capitalism. Capitalism has been misrepresented practically from its inception, both by its enemies and its alleged defenders. But the amount of distortion and misrepresentation which goes on today, even though evidence to the contrary is available and is accumulating year by year, is truly staggering. It is perhaps the single most misrepresented issue in cultural history. Therefore, it is important to ask ourselves, what are people's real reasons? When people are blind to the truth, obviously blind, when the issue is not merely an error of knowledge, is not a matter of ignorance, but of psychological vested interests, we have to ask what are the vested interests behind people's attitude. And in the case of capitalism, the very obvious psychological root is man's fear of independence. Fear of independence, first of all, and consequently, fear of rationality. An anti-rational mentality is necessary to be anti-capitalist. And on a more formal level, these psychological evils unite in support of the morality of altruism. People are led to hate capitalism to the extent to which they subscribe to the altruist morality. In many cases, they would feel dimly, because they would be evading the issue and trying not to admit it, they would feel that there is a bad clash between the conventional morality which they have been taught to accept, which they're not independent nor brave enough to reject, and a clash between that and the nature of capitalism. In that sense, the nature of reality. They are caught between the fact of a false moral theory, which they dare not challenge, namely altruism, and the facts of reality which demonstrate over and over again that capitalism is the best, the most practical, and the most moral, in fact, the only moral system in human history. People dare not face that dichotomy because capitalism is incompatible with the morality of altruism. And those who have accepted that morality have such a psychological vested interest in it that they take their inner conflict out on capitalism. They make capitalism the whipping boy of their own inner contradictions. They know, in psychological sense, subconsciously, that they are wrong in regard to altruism, and they therefore acquire a vested interest to try to prove that capitalism is evil. If they can discredit capitalism, they can consider themselves free to pursue their own impractical, vicious morality. That is in terms of moral considerations. But deeper than that is, of course, the question what attracts them to the morality of altruism. Why has that morality been perpetuated for such a long time in spite of its obvious evils and blatant contradictions? And here we come to the issue I named first, that is people's fear of independence, fear of relying on their own judgment, on their own mind, and therefore feel fear of reason. It is their subconscious and sometimes conscious desire to permit a loophole to their irrationality. It is their reluctance to be at the mercy of an absolute reality. It is a desire to bypass reality in some way, to cut corners, to have an escape clause for their whims, their wishes, their fears, and the irrational element within them. What they fear when they fear capitalism is objectivity, rationality, and reality.
Ms. Rand, we're discussing the anti-capitalistic mentality, and we're doing that in the singular, although you've just pointed out that many of the causes are plural. Would you say that these plural causes do result in a singular anti-capitalistic mentality?
Well, not mentality in the sense of individual psychology. If you mean are all anti-capitalists in effect psychologically alike, I would say of course no. As in any evil, there are as many different psychological variants as there are people, but certain basic premises they would have in common. I would say the anti-capitalist mentality is the mentality which is afraid of independence, afraid of reason, afraid of reality. But that is in very broad fundamental terms. Within those broad abstractions, there are all kinds of variations and combination of elements which would operate in any given individual. So you may ascribe certain generalized principles to a type of mentality which would be opposed to capitalism, and these principles would operate in various degrees in every man who opposes capitalism, but it is not to say that everyone who opposes it is alike in all psychological essentials.
Mr. Hood.
Ms. Rand, would you elaborate the relationship between subjectivism, the view that a reality is not perceived by consciousness but is created by consciousness, and the idea of statism, which seems to be in large degree based on the idea that if the government sets about to do something, that it can automatically achieve its ends irrespective of the facts of reality?
Well, you have really named the essence of the question here. Those who want to escape from reason and reality can do so only by means of hoping that their hopes, wishes, or fears can somehow triumph over reality, that one does not have to be bound by facts, that one's wishes can somehow succeed, regardless of whether they correspond to the facts of reality or contradict them. In such a case, the only excuse, not moral excuse, but psychological semblance of an excuse for such people is the fact that most of their desires and their irrationality takes place in the social context, and that if they wish something which is contrary to the facts, society, meaning other people, will somehow provide it. If they act irrationally, other people will save them from the consequences of their irrationality. If they demand the irrational or the unearned, other people will provide it. As Mr. Brandon said once, anyone who introduces a somehow into his idea of the means of achieving his ends always means somebody. And this is the clue to the statist psychology. They hope that by enslaving the producers of the goods in life, the economic producers, by creating an omnipotent state which will rule everybody's life, they, the irrationalists, will somehow ride on the shoulders of the rational members of society, the productive members, those able to deal with the facts of reality properly, not only in the issue of producing material goods, material wealth, but in all issues. If these providers are enslaved by the state, then their energy and their productiveness will permit the irrationalist to gain the unearned. The unearned in matter, in the form of unearned wealth, and the unearned in spirit, in the form of unearned honors or government positions. The sole means to achieve the unearned, not to achieve it because one can't, but to attempt to achieve it, is by means of physical force, which is why the enemies of capitalism are statists. There is no alternative to a free society except the establishment of a totalitarian state, which is the rule of man by force. When force is the standard of social relationships, then the irrational man may hope that somehow, by force, his masters will provide him with what he wants, will take care of him. He is willing to give total obedience to the state in exchange for the state saving him from the problem which he dreads most. That is the problem of facing life on his own, the problem of taking the responsibility for his own life, his own actions, and his own judgment. That is what he dreads, and his sole recourse, since there is in fact no escape from reality, is to hide behind those men whom he observes around him, who are able to deal with reality, who are not afraid to think, who act on their judgment and produce all values that men have ever achieved, intellectually or materially. It is these men that the irrationalist wants to enslave and force somehow to provide for him. This theme, of course, is clearly illustrated in Atlas Shrugged.
Mr. Unger.
Mr. Rand, in light of what you just said, I wondered whether you'd comment on the following thesis, in that it's not intellectual cowardice or default that causes most people to reject capitalism, but it's rather a matter of social status. That is, that the overwhelming majority of people, the same people whom, by the way, in a majoritarian, that is, or a democracy system, control the political power, since most people then are employees, that is, workers, to use that phrase in quotes, versus the owners of the system, that they would have a natural antipathy. That is, they have no stake, so they would think, in the difference between their status in a free enterprise system versus a status system, that they would still be on the employees' end of the social class structure, and therefore any control that they would want to impose upon those owners, their employers, would be negligible.
Now that is a very fallacious argument on several counts. To begin with, there is no such thing as an employee mentality, or rather it exists, but more among non-employees than among employees. A man is not conditioned by his economic status. His ideas are not determined by it. True, there are more employees than employers, but it does not mean that they are all psychologically condemned and have resigned themselves to the status of an employee. In a free society, and this has been well illustrated in the freer period of American life, there is no class of employees. The employees of today are the employers of tomorrow. The self-made man, which is a typical American phenomenon, that is a phenomenon of a free society, is a man who rises from bottom, from the status of employee to an owner of his own business or to a big tycoon, as they call him. All the big figures of American industry were such men, self-made men, who either rose from the bottom through the ranks of employees or, inheriting some small business, created from it a much larger enterprise through their own ability. Therefore, the fact that a man is employee does not necessarily paralyze him. The issue there is psychological. Does he intend to remain merely an employee, or does he want to rise? And the important thing here is that nature forbids man to stagnate, which is one of the reasons why statist economies always fail and create nothing but disaster, collapse, and general poverty. There is no level of ability, no matter how modest, on which a man may properly stagnate, that is, may stagnate with impunity. Nature demands of man a constant movement forward, a constant improvement in his knowledge and in his method of functioning and working, a constant progress. Progress is in the nature of life as such and of human life in particular. Therefore, a man who wants to stagnate on any given level is acting immorally and irrationally. He is acting contrary to the facts of his own nature. And a man who decides that he is an employee and will remain so is already psychologically unhealthy. He is already on a wrong premise. And it is true that there are such men, great number, but you must remember that they are, to some extent, created by the system under which they live. And this is true particularly of men of average ability. In a free society, which is geared to the requirements of man's nature properly, which leaves men free to function to the full extent of their ability and to achieve the rewards which they are able to earn, every man would have to be in a constant position of progress and motion. If he cannot become an entrepreneur on his own, he was not expected to remain an unskilled laborer all his life either. He will have to improve his skill and knowledge and rise to the extent that his ability permits. Therefore, the same principle of constant progress, the anti-stagnation principle, would operate for all levels of economic success or ability in a free society. It does make a difference to an employee whether he is free to move, to work harder, work better, and therefore get appropriate rewards, or he is tied to a group in a kind of status society and is held down to the level of that group. If he is born a certain type of worker, he remains that type of worker, as they did in the Middle Ages. There is no such thing as a class mentality. But when men live in a mixed economy, as they do today, the incentives for them to rise are getting less and less, and the difficulties, the obstacles, more and more. So that if you take them in that period of flux, you might find that a great many men today would feel, what's the difference, whether the state or a boss employs me, I have no chance anyway. But that type of psychology is the product of a mixed economy, meaning a society on its way down towards a dictatorship. This is not the normal psychology of the majority of men. The majority of men, not being initiators or originators intellectually, react according to the society in which they live. If they have a chance to function at their best, they will. If not, they give up. But the fault there is in the system, not in human nature.
Mr. Gandolfi.
Ms. Rand, since 1958, there were 40,000 millionaires in this country. In 1965, there are close to 100,000 millionaires. This has all happened despite a very heavy tax structure. Since the number of people who have become owners of their own business has increased so markedly, how is it that we still maintain in the popular press and in most works the idea that avenues open to people today no longer exist, that the idea that the time of the self-made man, or the man who could rise by his own abilities, is limited and has passed?
This type of argument is very dangerous. Statistics never prove anything until and unless you define just exactly what you mean by a given set of statistics, under what circumstances, in what context it was taken. For instance, the number of millionaires obviously wouldn't mean anything, since to become a millionaire 20 years ago or 50 years ago took much more than it does today. Today, we observe popular expressions and go into $1 billion, not $1 million. So the $1 million baby today would be kind of cheap. One would have to say, you look like $1 billion. And if you notice that type of inflation is already taking place in popular expression. A million made today does not mean as much, does not require as much effort as it did years ago because the money is cheaper. We'll buy less. But that is not the point. The real point is this, that so long as there is an element of freedom, man will rise and will succeed. But the real issue is to observe what amount of effort is required of man in proportion to what type or degree of achievement. And it is unmistakably true that it is much harder today to achieve anything by individual effort than it was, let us say, the turn of the century. A man who then, using his intelligence and ability, might become a multimillionaire, let us say, today will be fortunate if he gets to open his own small business. It is true that it is much harder for men to rise today because the rise must be measured not merely in terms of financial income, but in terms of the nature of the achievement, the nature of the independence and of the advantage that a man accomplishes, granting a certain ability and effort. Now, the issue of the age of individual achievement being passed, if I understand your argument correctly, you are citing this statistic to indicate that the age of achievement is not passed, but it isn't by means of statistics that you can demonstrate it. Because it is true that it is harder today, but what you have to analyze is why is it harder? And the difficulty does not lie in the technological development or in the spread of the complexity of scientific discovery. The difficulty lies in the growth of controls. It is hard today for an individual achievement, not because science or the development of industry makes it harder, but big government, that is the growth of the powers of government, the growth of controls, that makes an individual achievement today almost impossible or harder than it had been in a freer or semi-free period of American history. The idea that science is a threat to individualism in economics has to be refuted on its own terms, and it is a blatant contradiction. Observe in what way? If a primitive, non-industrial economy could not be run successfully by government controls, and freedom was required to create in industry in the first place, to create the Industrial Revolution, by what reasoning would one say that a developed industry, a highly complex technological industry, must be run by slave labor? That slave labor is impractical in a pre-industrial economy, but becomes practical in a complex scientific technological economy. And of course, the best practical illustration of that is the failure, the abysmal failure, I underscore, of a country like Soviet Russia and of every type of dictatorship when they take over an industrial or semi-industrial society. After 50 years, which is half a century, Russia is still unable to feed her population. Compare that to the progress made in the same 50 years in America and in other semi-free economies. Compare the difference in the development of East Germany and West Germany since World War II, and it's there that you have the evidence and the proof and the argument for the superiority of a free economy which is required by an industrial age more so than at any other time.
Mr. Gandolfi.
What I wanted to illustrate by those statistics was that many people today oppose capitalism not because of its material deficiencies, but because they want to somehow justify their own failure to live up to their own to achieve their own values. And if they believe that it is impossible for man to succeed today, then it is an excuse for their own failure.
Oh, I see. Well, this is true, but what is more true is that they are afraid of the independence and the freedom that capitalism requires, what I mentioned in my opening remarks. People who do not want the responsibility of functioning independently blame capitalism and say that capitalism makes it impossible, or capitalism is gone. The development of science requires that we go now to statism, and therefore capitalism is obsolete. What they are really rationalizing is their own fear of independence. So that is what is involved in arguments of this type.
Mr. Hood.
Ms. Rand, we hear a shocking amount of talk these days about a guaranteed income. So-called conservative economist has advocated this position. A group of businessmen have advocated it. And it seems to be coming from a group, originating from a group called the Committee on the Triple Revolution. And they claim that because of automation and computers, the necessity for work and for capitalism, which is a work-oriented society, is becoming a thing of the past. What is the true root of these proposals?
The true root of these proposals is plain, vicious, inexcusable ignorance. Either ignorance and or fraud, and there is nothing more to be said about it. Because the idea that work will become unnecessary is only proof of the total ignorance of what constitutes a complex industrial economy. The idea that machines will run themselves proves that whoever makes such claims has never looked at industry and has never done a day's work. Obviously, the higher the industrial development, the more complex the machine, the more is required of the workers. The accusation that automation threatens incomes or will throw people out of work was made at every turning point in the history of the Industrial Revolution. I will just remind you of the workers who were smashing England's textile factories when they were first introduced. And what has history proved? That the introduction of new technology creates wider opportunities for jobs and requires a larger workforce. There will never be a time when machines will do the work of men. Those who claim it merely confess their own psychology. It may be true that machines could replace them, but no one will ever invent a vicious machine of that kind.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rand. I'm afraid that is all the time that we have for this evening's discussion. I'd like to thank our panelists for this evening, Arthur Gandolfi of Columbia College, Jack Unger and Howard Hood of the Columbia University School of Law. This is your host, Jack Kress, speaking. Good evening.
Hey, yo, check this. This is a Kid Smooth.